Good afternoon. I'm excited to be here. So I need to say no more about the genius of Palantir, except, of course, I will. But as some of you know, of course, Palantir owes its existence to another company, an earlier technology company that blazed a trail of innovation in the field of money, PayPal. So in some ways, me being here means we're coming full circle. Palantir was founded in 2004 by the management team and the key technology team out of PayPal. At the time, 9/11 was a very recent memory, and there were some key insights that had helped to prevent PayPal from being clobbered by fraud. And it was those insights that the team thought were applicable to the area of intelligence and counterterrorism in particular, and also more generally to the problem of harnessing the digital flood into something useful rather than counterproductive. Today, the result was an enterprise-scale data fusion and analysis platform, much more eloquently put a couple of minutes earlier, originally developed for intelligence organization. Today, we're deployed globally and in a variety of different sectors. And what I want to talk about today is why cyber is one of our fastest growing areas. We think that the reason is that as the scale and sophistication of the cyber threat increases, organizations increasingly find themselves forced to look at cyber from an intelligence perspective. And the topic of my talk today is to explain what I mean by that. But first, allow me to give a little bit of context. These are the headlines from the Financial Times, just about the UK, about cyber threat just this year, and the latest one is from today. The reason for the swelling sense of alarm is that the cyber ecosystem has changed dramatically over the last couple of years, and organizations which used to be attacked every couple of months now consider responding to these attacks to be part of their daily operations. Attackers have also grown much more advanced and ambitious. They now target families of organizations and operate in a campaign fashion rather than in one-off incidents. Most people by now understand that nobody is exempt. Everybody is vulnerable, but vulnerable to what? Cybercrime is still too often thought of as something abstract. In people's heads, it remains virtual, victimless, when in actual fact, we're talking about very traditional criminal activity in a new medium, perpetrated with ever-increasing sophistication and skill in exploiting the blind spots in traditional security technology. What we have here, from left to right, is the chronicle of a modern bank robbery. As you can see, this is an extremely complicated sequence of events stretching over months. In real life, this chart is several meters long. It affected hundreds of machines and was orchestrated with great sophistication and campaign-style planning. And like in so many great heist movies, our thieves knew the blind spots of traditional anti-intrusion technology, so nothing was detected until the money was gone. And in fact, even the post-mortem required fundamentally different approaches and technologies to figure out what had actually happened. So what is the problem with the traditional solution to this problem? The problem is that for investigators to piece a story like this together, or better still, to be able to analyze the threat proactively, they have to be able to ask and get answers to lots of questions. Questions like, what indicators of bad activity can I spot? Can I identify significant sequences, ideally before the damage is done? A beaconing pattern, perhaps, where each access to a critical database is followed by access to the web. And in order to be prepared properly, can we identify anomalies? Now, of course, to be able to know what is anomalous, you have to understand what is normal. What should you expect to see at a given time of day or year? And finally, in order to be able to respond if and when breaches occur, and they will occur. The key question is, how quickly can we respond? How long does it take to understand what caused the original vulnerability? How has it moved through the network? And what has been exposed that might be critical? In other words, we need to be able to think and work like an intelligence analyst. The problem is that the nature of the data being interrogated makes just that fantastically difficult. There's the fact that the data being queried has been generated for and by computers, looks a little bit like this, even though for people who do this for a living, they know that the irony is that this is already something that's pre-digested for human consumption. And then there's the problem of scale. With the work we do, we're used to handling scale, but cyber data is a different order of magnitude altogether. Emails, proxy traffic, web logs, at a large institution, each of these may be in the terabytes range. And as we've seen from our heist chronicle, effective analysis means not just looking at days, but weeks, perhaps months of data. So analysts are faced with daunting amounts of data to sift through, maybe 1 billion log lines per day. And with traditional methods, this analysis is extremely slow and difficult. Queries may take several hours to return the desired results. And crucially, trend analysis over time is entirely impossible because most systems can only handle small windows of data at this scale. The next challenge is even harder: data disparity, or the diversity of data types, and the sheer number of sources that need to be reconciled. We already mentioned 3: email traffic, structured metadata, as well as the unstructured text in the body; proxy, which keeps track of each website visited from an institution's network; web logs, which record each action taken on an organization's website. These are already very different, from unstructured free text to highly structured log data. But there are hundreds more discrete data sources that hold valuable clues for our investigations. And making matters worse, concepts are usually represented in different ways in different data sets, across internal teams, and certainly across institutions. This is why asking a seemingly simple question, like what does my organization know about this IP address, can be extremely difficult and require hitting tens of databases. And finally, real life looks nothing like the neat columns in the previous slide. In fact, it looks like this: an organically grown jungle of data repositories siloed from each other, and in turn siloing off the people working on them, so that the experts who look at different pieces of the problem are functionally and technically separated. In conclusion, we don't see this as a cyber data problem. Rather, cyber is an enterprise data problem, very like problems you might encounter in intelligence, law enforcement, or counter fraud. So I'm not going to bore you with the specifics of what can be done about it, but jump right to the heart of it. And if I could click, which is this. The goal for the user is to have one access point to all the organization's knowledge. It doesn't matter what it looks like under the hood. What you want, if you ask questions, is that you want to hit everything that you supposedly know, and you want it to come back to you in a way that makes sense. Once you've achieved that, no matter what the stuff under the surface looks like, you'd be able to ask questions across your entire organization, regardless of source and format, and the results can then be translated into a common integrated view of the situation across functional silos. A very quick look at what this might look like in practice. So let's imagine we are analysts at a very large bank, and we're concerned that people are attacking our network. A colleague at another organization, which just got hacked, sent over a list of suspicious IP addresses, and we start investigating. On this graph, we already have identified the 4 users who used the machines which connected to the bad IP addresses, in order to get to this point, we had to search through our logs to, 1, figure out if anyone inside the organization has reached out to those IPs, 2, which machines were involved, and 3, which individuals use these computers. So now, since we're concerned that these machines could be compromised, we focus just on critical production databases. At the top here are the IP addresses we started with. And we now check out the timeline to get a better sense of what's going on. We're left with what looks like a pattern. Not a perfect beacon, but we need to look at this more closely. Using a time filter, we now see a user connecting to a production database, and then 5 minutes later, the asset reaches out to a suspicious IP. The beaconing happens approximately every 4 hours on the timeline, and looking at the red time wheel, we can see that all of this happens with machine-like precision. So maybe a machine is set to exfiltrate data to bad guys at the suspicious addresses, and this could be happening even without its user being aware. So at this point, we have actionable intelligence, and it didn't take us a long time to get there. A final thought I want to leave you with is the increasing importance of collaboration. This is another way in which we think cyber and real-life threat preparedness are converging. Only in cyber, we have a long way to go yet. For now, the relative inability of commercial organizations to share threat information with each other, to collaborate, and to build off one another's efforts is hampering the resilience of the industry as a whole. Banks are targeted by the same malicious actors. Hackers often target many institutions, so each organization may only have one piece of the information puzzle. It's only when the pieces are assembled that the complete picture emerges. Cyber defense is not a matter of competitive advantage, but about combating a shared threat. At the end of the day, data security is not a zero-sum game. And if we do the thought experiment of transposing the whole thing to counter terrorism, you would never think that the bomb going off next door was somehow in your favor because it hosed your competitor. You would immediately rush to the police and tell them everything you know because you know you're next. And cyber threat is really no different from that. Moreover, the technology to achieve this seamlessly already exists and has proven itself in contexts that are much more challenging. If the defense and intelligence communities can leverage technology to share sensitive information across organizations, across access levels, and even across the globe, then the financial community can do the same and reap the same rewards. Thank you very much.
So Melina, on the stage today have been lots of hungry, ambitious, but fairly thinly resourced startups trying to make transaction seamless, foreign currency movements seamless, peer-to-peer lending seamless. On the assumption that these parts of the financial network may be the more vulnerable, what advice would you give them, and how worried would you be for a sector where there are lots of newcomers coming in and taking up increasingly important roles in the financial transaction ecosystem?
So the advice that I would give is that it's an advantage and a disadvantage. Yes, the threat is big, but you're new to the space, so you can actually build in a model to defeat the threat into your business model. When PayPal got started, there were several competitors in that space. And every single last one of them was essentially a big financial player who thought that they were obviously going to rule this space. And in the end, the company that came out of nowhere won. And the reason why they won was that they were able to solve the fraud problem, whereas the others had just assumed there was no problem. They were just going to use the same technology that was solving fraud in the credit card space. So they already had a preconceived idea how this was going to work. They already had an idea of what technology was going to work. In the end, it didn't, and the company who came at the problem fresh won. So I think this should be an inspiration to anybody starting in this space.
So finally, some practical advice to the people here who have companies who may not afford Palantir type consultation fees. What could they go back and do tomorrow morning?
Well, we don't have any consultation fees, so they should be just fine.
But I mean, if they don't have the means to go to a big company like yours, what should they do tomorrow to improve their own security?
There are lots of very, very easy things you could do, and I would suggest we're starting those. But then again, you know, we're not just for the big guys. We don't have consulting fees, and I encourage anybody to come talk to me.
The pitch room's the other room. I mean, we know that Palantir does great work, but without going to Palantir, what should people do?
So, I mean, taking Palantir out of the picture, first of all, there are lots and lots of very simple things that anybody can do but ignores to do. You know, the other that I would suggest is talk to other people about how they do this. You know, join organizations that encourage knowledge sharing and collaboration across these issues. If the very big guys have to do this, you know, the small ones can only benefit.